In this CSS tutorial, I'm going to show you the fastest way to use CSS media queries, min and max values in particular. You can type any CSS inside the media query, which is defined by the word media and the @ sign. So here, I'm going to apply some background color to the body tag. Once I refresh the browser, you will see that the color was applied. Without any rules, the media query works exactly like regular CSS. So let's go ahead and apply some rules so that this red background doesn't just appear all the time. Let's say only when the height of the browser is 800. So if I refresh the browser now and try to find 800 pixels height by resizing it, you will see that the background will be applied only when the browser is 800 pixels height exactly. Most of the time when it comes to CSS media queries, you will use min and max values because let's face it, this is just not very useful. So what does it mean to use min and max values? Well, we can change the height to min height. And so what this means is the CSS will now be applied only if the height is greater than 800 pixels, which is a little more useful. Now, in the same way, you can use max height, and basically it's going to be doing the same thing, except when the height is less or 800 pixels. Again, the CSS styles you specified in this media query will be applied if that condition is met. Now, we also have max width and min width, which works exactly the same way on a different axis. So if you resize it left and right, you will have those styles applied based on whether the width less than 800 pixels or more than 800 pixels respectively. Now, the media queries in CSS with the min and max values is something you have to play around with to get a better idea of how it actually works. But in this next example, we're going to take a look at one of the most widely used cases. So here I have my root document with a large border of 50 pixels, and below I have 3 media queries because yes, we can combine media queries. And so let's take a look at what happens if we apply multiple max width values with some CSS. So as you can see, media queries can be used to change the layout based on the width of the browser. In a real case scenario, you would replace these media queries with the actual width for things like iPhones and full screen desktop areas and stuff like that. And now if I change width to height in these examples, you can scale vertically as well based on the width of the browser. So again, you have to play around with this to make sure that it does exactly what you want it to do, and that can be pretty much anything. But other than that, the default media query setting is set to screen. So it's the same thing that we've been using so far. But there's also print and there's also speech. The print keyword is used to change how CSS looks like on a printed out pages. So if you're printing out your website, the CSS can potentially look different based on what you specify here. And the speech keyword is used for devices that have speech enabled navigation. Whenever you use one of these special keywords, your CSS media query is not going to work unless you also specify and keyword. So if you're using screen, you have to use and, otherwise it's not going to work. Or simply delete both of them, it's going to be exactly the same thing because it's just the default value anyway. Now, if you want to use media queries such as min and max or any other value in all device modes such as print and speech, you will use all keyword, but you also have to use all with the and keyword. Now let's go back to default media query, which is screen all. So here min width is obviously not the only value you can use, but the problem is most of them are not that useful at all. So here we have max height, max width, and a whole bunch of them, but honestly they're not very useful and it's kind of difficult to understand exactly when to use them. And for this reason, really, in large number of cases, you will only be using min width, min height, and things like that we covered in this tutorial. You know, the ones that work with the width, height, basically the dimensions of your browser, so you can change your layout accordingly. Probably because media queries min and max values are some of the most commonly used features when it comes to dealing with CSS media queries.